Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're cracking open the definitive scientific field guide to one of the most incredible, most awe-inspiring animals that ever walked the Earth, Tyrannosaurus Rex. So let's start with its name, right? Tyrannosaurus Rex. It literally translates to Tyrant Lizard King, a name given to it way back in 1905. And honestly, could there be a more perfect name? It just perfectly sets the stage for the colossal creature we're about to get to know.
All right, so our guidebook today is broken down into 5 chapters. We're going to start with the tyrant's family tree, then dig into the anatomy of a killer, imagine a day in its life, touch on some big unsolved mysteries, and wrap it all up with its legacy in stone. Okay, first up, Chapter 1, the tyrant's family tree. See, to really get a handle on T-Rex, you've got to go back. Way back, long before it ever wore the crown.
T-Rex didn't just pop into existence. Not at all. It was the grand finale of a dynasty that lasted for almost 100 million years. The whole story actually starts with these small, feathered ancestors, creatures like Wanlong. Then, over time, as these tyrannosauroids spread out across the globe, they started getting bigger and bigger, until finally, around 68 million years ago, T-Rex shows up on the scene, the last and by far the most powerful of its entire family line. And what's really wild is just how dramatic that transformation was. I mean, you look at its early ancestors like Dilong. They were lightweight, they were nimble, and they were probably covered in these simple, primitive feathers. And then you flash forward to the end result. T-Rex, a massive 10-ton monster, an apex predator built for pure power, mostly covered in scales. It's just an absolutely incredible story of evolution in action. So, let's see how that long journey ended up building the ultimate killing machine. Time for Chapter 2, Anatomy of a Killer. First things first, let's just try to wrap our heads around the sheer scale of this animal. An adult T-Rex could stretch out to 13 meters long. That's about 43 feet. To put that in perspective, that's as long as a school bus. This incredible size, well, that was the foundation for its total dominance. And the weights? We're talking up to 10 tons. That's right up there with a big, modern elephant. And all of that mass was balanced on just 2 incredibly powerful hind legs. So how did it not just fall over? Well, that's where the long, heavy tail came in. It acted as a perfect counterbalance to that huge head and body. But of course, the main event was its weapon system. And its primary weapon? That bite. Modern models estimate its bite force at over 12,800 newtons. Now, what does that even mean? Well, picture a small car pressing down on a single point. That's the kind of force we're talking about. It was, without a doubt, the strongest bite of any land animal ever. It could literally shatter solid bone. The whole head was just a marvel of lethal engineering. The skull itself was 1.5 meters long, and it was really wide at the back, which gave it amazing binocular vision, perfect for judging distances. The jaw wasn't V-shaped, it was U-shaped, so it could rip out bigger chunks of flesh. And the teeth, they weren't like sharp knives, they were more like thick, serrated cones. People call them lethal bananas, built to puncture and crush bone. Throw in an unbelievable sense of smell and a crazy muscular neck designed for tearing, and, well, you've got the perfect killing machine. But all this impressive anatomy, it always leads to that one big question everybody asks, right? Yeah, the tiny arms. They might look a little goofy, but they were anything but useless. They were only about 1 meter long, sure, but the bones show these massive attachment points for muscles. Scientists have done the math, and they think each arm could lift almost 200 kilograms. That's nearly 440 pounds. So what were they for? Well, there are a few ideas floating around. Maybe for holding on to struggling prey, or for grabbing a mate, or maybe even to help push its gigantic body up off the ground after a rest. Okay, so we've got the hardware down, now let's talk about the software. Chapter 3, A Day in the Life. What was it actually like to be a T-Rex? For the longest time, one of the biggest debates was about how T-Rex got its food. Was it an active, terrifying hunter, or was it just a giant scavenger? And honestly, the evidence is pretty good for both sides. For the hunter theory, you've got those forward-facing eyes, perfect for depth perception. And we've even found fossils of prey, like Triceratops, with healed T-Rex bite marks on them. But then, on the scavenger side, it had these huge olfactory bulbs in its brain, meaning it had an incredible sense of smell, perfect for sniffing out a dead body from miles away. Plus, those bone-crushing teeth were ideal for getting at the marrow in leftover carcasses.
So where do we land on this today? Well, that whole debate is pretty much settled. The consensus now is that T-Rex was an opportunist. It wasn't one or the other, it was both. Just like most big carnivores today, think lions or bears, it was a terrifying apex predator when it needed to be, but it was also smart enough to never ever pass up an easy meal. But even with everything we think we know, T-Rex is still holding on to a few secrets. And that brings us to Chapter 4, Unsolved Mysteries.
Maybe the biggest debate happening right now is a really visual one. What did T-Rex actually look like? Specifically, did it have feathers? I mean, we know its earlier, smaller relatives like Tyrannosaurus were just covered in them. So T-Rex too? It's tricky. The family tree definitely points towards feathers. But the few actual skin impressions we have from adult T-Rex show scales. So the leading idea right now is that maybe the young ones had some fuzzy down, but the giant adults lost them to avoid overheating. Because think about it, a 10-ton animal is going to generate a ton of body heat.
And this is a perfect example of how science is always evolving. For a long time, we pictured T-Rex as this super fast sprinter, chasing down jeeps. But the latest biomechanical models, which really look at bone stress and muscle, paint a different picture. They suggest a top speed more like 18 to 27 kilometers an hour, which is still fast, but it's not a sprint. In fact, studies suggest its most comfortable walking speed was only about 4.6 kilometers per hour, which is pretty much the same as a person's.
All of this incredible science, all of these discoveries, they're only possible because of what T-Rex left behind for us. So for our final chapter, let's look at that, a legacy in stone. So much of what we know about T-Rex really comes down to a few fossil superstars. There's Sue, the most complete skeleton ever found. She tells a story of a hard life, full of injuries and even disease. Then you have Scotty, who showed us just how massive these things could get, really pushing the limits on their size. Stan has this amazing skull that shows clear evidence they fought with each other. And then there's B-Rex, which gave us this huge breakthrough. Scientists found special tissue inside her bones that confirmed she was female, a direct link to modern female birds getting ready to lay eggs. So, from its pretty humble beginnings to its absolute reign as an apex predator, Tyrannosaurus Rex is still a giant, not just of the Cretaceous period, but of modern science too. Every new fossil we find adds another page to its story, changing what we know about its power, its life, and its world. The tyrant lizard king might be long gone, but its story is far from over, which leaves us with one really exciting question. What on earth are we going to discover next?